When a marriage breaks down, it is an unfortunate reality that the financial needs of a dependent spouse do not pause. The legal system is inherently methodical. Reaching a final, equitable division of assets often requires months or years of procedural steps. This creates a tension between slow legal procedure and immediate urgency. While a case moves through the courts, mortgage payments, household bills, and daily living expenses continue to accrue. This gap allows for financial attrition, where a financially stronger party can effectively pressure a vulnerable spouse into an unfavorable early settlement simply to meet basic needs. To counter this vulnerability, the Matrimonial Causes Act 1973 provides a specific statutory tool, Section 22. Maintenance Pending Suit, or MPS, is a short-term interim mechanism. It is designed solely to provide immediate financial support during the life of the case. Practitioners must distinguish MPS from interim periodical payments or final periodical payments. Conflating these distinct orders is a common professional error. MPS operates under specific jurisdictional triggers and a unique evidentiary standard. Protecting a client's position requires mastering these individual mechanics. Success in securing this relief depends on correctly mapping these statutory triggers onto the precise chronological stages of a divorce. This timeline identifies the starting line for any financial remedy application, the moment the divorce application is formally issued. The jurisdiction for an MPS order triggers immediately upon that issue. This allows for swift intervention. Practitioners can apply for relief without waiting for further procedural milestones to be met. However, this specific operational window has a fixed endpoint. The jurisdiction for Section 22 relief stops at the pronouncement of the conditional order. The conditional order marks the point where the court confirms the entitlement to a divorce, which fundamentally changes the available procedural remedies. Once the conditional order is pronounced, any further interim support must be sought as interim periodical payments under Section 23. While the two types of support fulfill similar functions, they occupy entirely different procedural stages. Applying for interim periodical payments before a conditional order is jurisdictionally invalid. The court does not yet have the power to make an order under that label. This terminology shifts again once the final order is pronounced, which locks in the permanent financial remedies for the parties. MPS exists specifically to manage the volatility of the preconditional order phase. The practitioner must label their application based purely on where the case sits on the timeline, as the correct terminology dictates the court's jurisdiction. Beyond the timing of the application, the court must determine the specific award amount during the often chaotic initial weeks of a separation. Section 22 itself contains no specific factors, criteria, or checklists for a judge to follow when making this determination. This contrasts sharply with the requirements for a final order. Under Section 25, the court is mandated to conduct a rigorous analysis of 8 distinct statutory factors. That Section 25 analysis relies on the full Form E disclosure process, involving forensic accounting and asset tracing. If the court required that same forensic detail for MPS, the delay would defeat the purpose of immediate relief. The Section 22 threshold is different. The modern legal framework addressing this procedural tension is established in the 2021 case of Rattan v. Kuwad. This ruling confirmed the broad brush approach to maintenance pending suit. It directs the judge to make an order they deem reasonable based on a surface-level assessment of the party's immediate situation. In practice, this means the court should explicitly avoid a deep forensic examination of disputed finances or historical spending habits at the interim stage. The broad brush approach prevents interim hearings from becoming mini-trials that prematurely drain family resources. Practitioners should avoid over-litigating these applications. Presenting exhaustive, complex financial arguments at an MPS hearing will likely frustrate the judge and violate the Rattan principle. The evidentiary standard for MPS is deliberately less precise than a final order because its primary function is survival, not absolute parity. This functional focus on survival is reinforced by a modern separation between daily maintenance and legal funding. In the past, practitioners used MPS to secure funding for both a client's living expenses and the legal fees required to litigate the divorce. This changed with the Legal Aid, Sentencing, and Punishment of Offenders Act 2012, or LASPO. LASPO severely restricted public funding for financial remedy applications, creating a crisis for spouses who lacked the independent resources to pay for representation. The legislative response was the insertion of a new provision into the 1973 Act Legal Services Orders. This is now the exclusive mechanism for securing interim legal funding from a spouse. Practitioners must now bifurcate their strategy. Living expenses are sought under Section 22, while legal fees must be applied for separately under Section 22ZA. Applying under the wrong section for legal fees will result in the immediate dismissal of that portion of the claim. We can now integrate these procedural elements into a single operational model for interim financial remedies. In the first phase, Section 22 MPS covers the pre-conditional order gap, governed by the surface-level broad brush standard. After the conditional order, Section 23 interim periodical payments take over if the case remains unresolved. Throughout this process, legal funding must be managed on a parallel but separate track under Section 22ZA. Section 22 remains the most effective tool for stabilizing a financially vulnerable client at the earliest stages of a case. Success in these applications requires trusting the Raton principle and resisting the urge to overprove the case before the final hearing. Mastering these distinct statutory mechanisms ensures the practitioner maintains control over the pace of the litigation, preventing the client from being squeezed by financial attrition.